Hi guys, welcome back to my channel and to episode 6 of my new build garden renovation series. In this video I'll show you how I rendered my garden planters, added lights and then filled them cost effectively. If you came directly from episode 5, you'll have seen how I built these raised beds from scratch with no prior experience. Or if you're new here, maybe this is your first video, welcome. There's plenty more to see, so head over to my channel to watch the full garden reno series from episode 1 or follow the direct link in the description box below. Right, let's have a refresh on my new build plot, the shape of my back garden, the inspo for the whole project, and of course my very professional artistic plans. Much like previous episodes, I've never rendered before either, but I did some research and just gave it a go. There was conflicting advice on the internet regarding how to prep the blocks for rendering. As they're so porous, I decided to waterproof mine prior to the first scratch coat of render. My theory was that this may avoid damp patches or moss, etc. coming through the render and paint in the future. I'm using SBR, which feels like a really thin, watery PVA glue, and I'm just coating both the inside and the outside of the planters to waterproof them against weather and plant watering. I just used a £1 bucket and an old dustpan and brush to lather it on. You'll see here how the rainwater now just sits on the top of the blocks rather than soaking into the block like a sponge. Next, I lay out some plastic sheeting to dry, ready to commit a murder. Line my planters. This is to avoid wet soil sitting against the bare blocks, which may cause damp or moss over the years. Prior to pinning the sheeting in place, I drilled some downward diagonal holes near the bottom of the planters. And once I pinned the sheeting in place, I pierced it where the holes were to allow moisture from the rain or from watering plants to escape. Again, not sure if drainage holes, the SBR, the sheeting is absolutely necessary, but I'd rather be a total overkill Audrey than have to redo these in a few years because they're weathered and damp, etc. I'm pinning it to just above the second row of blocks and leaving a gap at the top. This is because I'll be rendering the inside of the planters to that point and the render won't stick to the plastic sheeting. Also, there's no need to render the entire inside of the planters as it won't be seen for soil, so it's a waste of time, money, materials, etc. Once lined, I poked through my drainage holes and also added some drainage holes in the base, hopefully to reduce excess moisture and avoid future mossy render. Okay, the reason you tuned in, rendering. Now, I don't gatekeep any information over here, so let me tell you that it was a lot harder than I anticipated. I sliced my finger. Take it from me, the scratching tool is sharp. Don't slide your finger down it to get the excess render off. You will cut yourself. And I also had a crazy, unrealistic expectation of what I'd get done in a day, which is weirdly becoming a theme amongst most of my projects, so maybe that's just me. Okay, cue my 10-hour day. First, I measured all of the edges and corners of the planters, and then I cut the plastic beading to size. I opted for plastic beading over metal beading just to avoid rust coming through the render in years to come. Then I cut my fiberglass rendering mesh to size. In hindsight, I should have just done both of these in real time, so measured, cut, rather than measuring all the lengths I needed, writing it down on a bit of paper, and then cut them all at once. Because when I took it all back outside, it became a bit of a puzzle figuring out which cut went where. However, once I solved my little puzzle, all the beading lined up nicely. Then I started to mix my render scratch coat mix. Again, after research and asking questions, I opted for 4 parts plaster and sand to 1 part cement with 250ml of waterproofer, which is the SBR. Wet your surface before beginning. My regret here was not laying something down to protect my flagstones, as rendering is messy. So if you do it, protect your surrounding surfaces. And then I just started. My technique was solely based on how I've seen plasterers use the trowels before. The method was to add a 5mm layer of render to the wall, then push the plastic beading into that so that it sticks, and then push the fiberglass mesh into it as well. The fiberglass mesh strengthens the render and acts as a scratch coat. However, I'll be adding an additional 5mm coating on top of the mesh and physically scratching that too. Basically a double scratch coat, which equates to 10mm. Again, this is possibly overkill, but there was so much conflicting advice online, so I'm going with the most robust way in hope that my planters will thrive and survive. The same was repeated on all of the outer surfaces of the planter and approximately 15cm into the inside of the planter up to the plastic sheeting. As mentioned before, there's no need to render deeper than this as it won't be seen once the planters are filled. Oh, look at me poor path. So this was the end result of my first go at rendering. The first planter is scratched, ready for its top coat. Let us all pray that it sets, doesn't crack, the top coat will stick, etc, etc. Typical British weather, sun all day until I'm home from work, so I couldn't render, but instead I worked in the rain to pin all of my plastic beading on, hoping that this would save us time if it's already in place and doesn't need to be pushed in the first 5mm scratch coat. At the next opportunity, I opted to work on the smallest planter first, hoping I'd gain confidence and improve my technique, ready to tackle the big one. As before, the first 5mm coating, I had the fiberglass mesh pushed into it, then the second 5mm coating physically got scratched by me, and that's how I created my 10mm scratch coat. Mandatory brew break, and repeat. The sun was beaming, so I worked left to right as it was slowly turning to shade. You'll notice if you focus on the shade line moving across. I did it this way so that the render didn't cure too quickly in direct sunlight and be at risk of cracking off. Not sure if that was necessary, but it was just a thought I had, so factored it in. Before starting on each section, because I'm rendering all the way to the ground, I swept the ground to try and avoid any grit or stone being pulled up into the render and wet the block work slightly before starting. Oh, we're on to the big one. Everybody act cool, act cool. It's happening. Don't look at it directly in the eye. Act cool. The bonus about needing a scratch coat is that it doesn't need to be neat, it just needs to be textured enough so that the top coat will later adhere. This gives you a practice run to get used to the weight of the render, the tools, and also to strengthen your upper arm and shoulders because, oh my god, whew, let me tell you that this is a workout. The lip on the plastic beading is really good because it sort of hangs over 15mm in total that you'll need, aka your 10mm scratch coat in total, and then later your 5mm top coat. So it acts as like an edging to pull your trowel up towards and then stop like excess slopping over the edge. So having all your edging done is really beneficial. And that's a wrap for today. Celebratory grapes to mark the occasion. Right, top coat time. The render mix now changes slightly. I'm now using 5 parts plaster and sand to 1 part cement with 1 part hydrated lime. Comes up so fluffy. So I won't lie, the first go at the top coat had us stressed and in a panic as this is what everyone's going to see, so I really felt the pressure to get it smooth. I kept going back over sections, which I think made it look worse each time I attempted to smooth it off more, or I'd tilt my trowel the wrong way and all the render would just suction off the wall and end up back on my trowel. It all got a little bit too much in the end. My arm and shoulder muscles were absolutely burning, so I called upon the other half to help us out. He mixes up some render while I was able to keep working and smoothing off the render as best as I could, and at the same time offered reassurance. He then started adding render to the top of the planter so that I just had to come along and smooth it off. It was the support I needed to hear that he was proud of us regardless and remind us that I'm a novice in all of this and it's all a learning experience. The next day I then felt able to continue and tackle what I'd started, and I made good progress. The whole theme of the garden is to have a rustic Mediterranean feel, so I felt less stressed to get the perfect finish, and guess what? I'm not qualified to achieve a perfect finish on my first go anyways, but what I can do is give it my best and not give up. During my online research, it recommended floating/sponging the top coat to help smooth it off. So I bought the gear but had no idea. The sponge float just pulled my top coat off. Maybe the sponge was too wet, maybe the top coat hadn't cured for long enough before I tried it, who knows. But I panicked, re-troweled where I tried it, and just decided to only use the trowel and my eyesight going forward to get the smoothest and most even finish that I could. Maybe it'll look absolutely pants in the long run, but also maybe it won't. I'm sure the curing/drying process will reveal me imperfections, but think rustic Mediterranean, guys. Rustic Mediterranean. The big planter was soon all top coated up, which leaves me with only the smallest planter left to do, a task for the weekend when I'm next off work. Or at 6 o'clock when I'm home from the hospital the next day. This meant for a late finish, but that's the last of the rendering all done. Looking out on my garden the following morning, it felt so nice to see the block work rendered, all a step in the right direction that makes the garden feel much less building sightly. My research advised me to avoid priming and painting the render until it's had a minimum of 1 week curing time. So where the long left side of the planters running along the wall is dried out nicely, I decided to sand away any rough parts and obvious imperfections. Not sure if this has really made any difference, but here's a before and after. You can decide. You'll see the render got smoother whilst my hands got rougher. Lush. From building site to tidy and levelled with the remaining sharp sand. I then added weed membrane whilst waiting for the last small planter to dry, and by that time I could sand it. Before painting the planters, I wanted to add some light, and because the block cut so easily with the handsaw in episode 5, I opted for a 28mm flat wood drill bit to make the holes for the spotlights. Like this. So, although the spotlights claim to be waterproof and outdoor approved, the wiring is going to run through the plant out of sight. So this means that they'll be in soil, which is a very damp environment and not easily accessed if they do need repairing. Now, if you've watched me up until now, you'll know I'm an overkill Audrey. So to lengthen the lifespan, I'm placing the spotlights and the wiring in plastic electrical conduit. I actually had this left over from my DIY CCTV install from episode 2. And then where they connect to each other inside, I'm using weatherproof tape protecting the conduit and wires further, hopefully further prolonging the life of the spotlights. I use this T-Rex tape, which I can vouch for is seriously sturdy stuff. Another hindsight, I'd have installed the lights and then the plastic sheeting inside the planters, rather than the wiring being on top of the sheeting, as this would have waterproofed them even further. It was a fiddly job, which was hard to film, so apologies for not really capturing it very well. But let there be light. Now, the wood drill bit seemed like a good idea until it wasn't. Blunt after 4 holes. Duh, Emma, they're made for wood, not blockwork. 28mm is the size I needed to fit the spotlight snug, but searching the internet I couldn't find a masonry screwed head drill bit in this size. If any manufacturers are watching, there's a gap in the market here. So the only 28mm bit that I could find was this absolute beastly looking diamond core drill bit, but like most things, I proceeded with the attitude of, surely I'm capable of using that. Fast forward to getting it home, and I was baffled as to how I was meant to start drilling a hole when the end is flat and looks like this. I couldn't find one video tutorial online. Actually, maybe I'll make this section into a little small mini tutorial in the future for anybody else buying this sort of drill bit for the first time as a beginner. So anyway, I ended up finding the operating instructions on Herbawire's website instead. You're about right. Of course, the 28mm size that I need is intended for experienced operators only. Champion. So, because I was intimidated, I did the first 4 holes off camera. There was definitely a knack to it, hence why I can see why it's recommended for experienced operators only. So yes, the holes aren't perfectly neat, as the drill bit will try to run away with you. But we're thinking rustic Mediterranean, remember? And I'm hopeful that once the spotlights are in and it's painted, nobody will notice. I found that wetting the wall beforehand and during made it easier and kept the drill bit cool. I powered the drill not too fast and approached the wall at an angle to try and get the squared teeth to bite. It took a few attempts, but once I got the bite, I could bring the angle of the drill down to 90 degrees while still drilling, and the diamond core worked its magic. I kept the drill bit cool with the hose throughout and also regularly emptied the core of the drill bit as little rendered concrete wall sausages build up inside the core. Hopefully you get the gist of what I mean. On reflection, if I was to do this again, I'd have got a scrap plank of wood, cut a 28mm hole in the centre and pinned it to the planter to use as a template and stop the drill bit running away. But hindsight is a beautiful thing. I'm happy to trial and error so that you guys succeed if you ever do this. Make yourself a DIY timber guide hole, you'll be sound. Anyways, I got there in the end. Not the neatest of holes, but also not bad for a novice. Before painting the raised beds and filling them with plants, I thought now would be the best time to add a privacy screen whilst I can still access the fence without obstacles like plants being in the way. And I played around with some reclaimed sleepers to see how many steps and at what height would look good to lead up to my raised decking. Yes, there's now decking under the pergola. You'll see how I did that in episode 7, so be sure to subscribe to my channel, which is absolutely free by the way, so that you don't miss out on anything coming up next. By the way, I picked up these used sleepers for free from Facebook Marketplace. They're definitely used and rotted in places, but for the length I'll be needing, the imperfect ends can just be chopped off and kept for firewood. No rot, I'm confident that these will be as good as new after a good sand and restain. Anyways, back to the steps. I only got so far and the rain came, standard, so I sheltered my work and made a cuppa, also standard. When the rain stopped, I uncovered the 2 steps which had set nicely. I actually then finally ran out of the reclaimed blocks that I'd gotten from Facebook Marketplace in episode 5. Jammy. So I went to my local DIY store and picked up some aerated concrete blocks. They were only a couple of quid each and I only needed a handful, so in the grand scheme of things, I've done rather well. Once built, I followed the same method, primed with SBR, cut the rendering bead into size and had microfiber mesh ready to push into the first 5mm layer of render to create my scratch coat. I actually didn't add a second 5mm coat and physically scratch it here, so let this be the test to see how the steps render holds up in comparison to the rest of the planters. Once the 5mm microfiber scratch coat had cured, I mixed more render and applied the top coat, taking me time to get it as neat as I could. Of course, the rain came, so the shelter was rebuilt to protect me render and allow it to set. Woohoo! Painting time! I prepped all of my rendered surfaces with a quick dry stabilising solution which suppresses the dusty surface. It definitely works, no dust then transferred onto me after it was applied. And then I chose some yummy looking paint, which is Ivory Stone Masonry Paint by Santex. I opted for an off-white colour to align with my rustic Mediterranean theme, and I was so happy with my choice. It instantly just brought so much light and freshness. After 3 coats, I still had over half of this tub left, so that can go in the garage and just be saved for any future touch-ups or a full refresh coat. The other half then helped me to spread out the Cotswold stone that I opted for. It literally made all of the difference. We couldn't get used to how bright and clean the garden now looked. To hide the privacy screens, we then pinned some bamboo screen into the fence. And against the newly painted planters, it just looked chef's kiss. Rewind to the free but used Facebook Marketplace sleepers and they came up a treat with a good old sand. Literally like new. I opted for a rich dark oak paint which will look yummy against the ivory planters. And once in place, I couldn't resist adding a few more holes to frame the steps with spotlights. Right, how did I fill such big planters cost effectively? I did some research online and found Hugel Coulter's layering concept. It allows cost-effective filling whilst also offering a breathable and organic environment for whatever I choose to grow. First, I had leftover clay bricks from the foundation stage in episode 1, so it made sense to use these up. Their holes will create a good drainage system. Next, I added a thin layer of cardboard. Then I needed branches and sticks, so again took to Facebook Marketplace and found a bloke up the road who'd recently chopped a tree and was giving away the accumulated logs for free. So I just popped up, picked them up and popped them in the planters. A bit of organic kitchen waste went in and some flowers that had seen better days. If it wasn't a rainy day, I would have also added some grass cuttings from the front garden too, but the grass was just too wet to cut. So I just went ahead and added some rich organic compost. I'd had a dumpy bag of screen topsoil ready to finish off my layering, but I really didn't need this much at all. Using the layering method meant that the majority of the planters were filled with organic matter, meaning I could have saved on buying the amount of soil I ordered, so you can bear that in mind for yourself. And there we have it guys, rendered raised beds with spotlights, all filled, ready for plants. Join me next time in episode 7 to see how I built my raised decking underneath the pergola to recess my hot tub into and see what I planted in the raised beds and then some other little finishing touches. If you made it this far, then thank you so much for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe to continue to see how I go from this building site to my very own little Mediterranean inspired garden. With love always, Dalton.